Live with another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. Tonight we have a very interesting guest, a man who has an extensive resume in the professional wrestling business, not just in WCW, but in TNA, Japan, and a couple of points in between, Mr. Alan Kwee Funk. But before I throw to him, I'd like to, of course, as per the tradition lately, introduce the host of his own show and his channel, Maurice. Maurice, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm good. Alan, this is not a glamour project. It's just that my internet is so shit that we actually run this thing from Canada. Look, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show today, Alan, and really appreciate you coming on to us. And look, we'll start by the way we ask kind of every wrestler that's on. How did you decide that this is something that you wanted to pursue?
You want this podcast or the wrestling?
The podcast was months of begging.
Now, you're talking about wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's, honestly, the first time I watched wrestling a little bit when I was a kid, probably, sixth grade, maybe 10 years old or so. But then what really got me is when I first watched Rocky III with Hogan on it. And I was like, holy crap, man, this guy's unbelievable. Like it, I don't know what it was after I watched that Rocky III, man, but I was, hooked on wrestling. I started watching it, and then rest is history, man. I was a big Hulk Hogan fan growing up, and, that's kind of how I got interested in it, oddly enough, for watching a boxing movie.
In terms of the decision that you had to pursue the career or wrestling as a career, was there an initial moment, or it's just something that you kind of laid all the groundwork for leading into?
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, once I watched that movie, man, Rocky III, I was pretty much hooked, and you could ask anybody I went to high school with, the whole school. I grew up in a small town, Alliance, Ohio, so everybody, knew everybody. The parents knew everybody, and everybody I went to high school with could probably tell you I wanted to be a pro wrestler from probably that point on. And I always told everybody I was going to be, in either an actor or a pro wrestler. So I kind of did both. So, I don't know. I just knew that it's what I wanted to do, and I was going to do it.
Tremendous. Can you talk about how you came to, two-part question, how you came to train at the power plant and your experiences there? Because we've heard a lot about that, some good, some bad. Just be interested in your perspective.
Yeah. Well, I started doing indies in Ohio with a buddy of mine, Greg Anderson. We were a tag team, and wrestled some good tag teams. You remember the Batten twins used to wrestle with World Class, and they did in Puerto Rico a lot. So that was like my first match ever in the indies. So, I got to wrestle with good guys, from the get-go, which I learned a lot from, because as far as training before the power plant, didn't really have much training other than my buddy Greg we had a ring in a old abandoned schoolhouse that the volunteer firemen owned in Robertsville, Ohio. And we trained in there like, a night or two a week, and basically just me and Greg and him showing me stuff, and just from watching it on TV, I kind of did what I saw on TV, and then I incorporated my own moves. And then once I started working with guys like the Batten twins, things started falling into place. I got to work. There was a guy, Johnny Paradise, used to do the WWE or WWF back in the day, the jobber guys on Saturdays. I knew a lot of those guys from the Ohio area, and got to work a lot with those guys. And, they knew a lot about the TV aspect of it, which I wasn't too worried about, because I was worried about getting better before I started worrying about that. So, but then I had an opportunity to come to the power plant, only because, watching the nitros and stuff. And then you see the commercial for where the big boys train, which was the WCW power plant. And honestly, other than not knowing how to get in the wrestling business, back then we didn't have the technology we have today to where everybody knows where to go train. Like I said, I'm from a small town, so I had no clue how I was going to go about getting into business. And that was the only avenue that I knew anything about. So, I called up the power plant and set up my tryout. Had a 3-day tryout, and which I'm sure you've heard. It was a living hell. 3 days of nothing but getting your butt kicked. I actually got my nose broken in my tryout. Out of about 17 guys, I was only one that made it through. So it wasn't a fun 3 days. And you see the stuff like the old A&E history of pro wrestling that they had that documentary years back. Honestly, it was one of the most brutal things I ever did in my life, but it was one of the most rewarding as far as dude, after the 3 days I couldn't even walk, to be honest with you. When I got on the airplane in Atlanta to fly back to Ohio, I honestly didn't know how I was going to make it on the airplane. I was cramping up, couldn't hardly walk without falling down on my face. It was pretty brutal. So the horror stories that people talk about the power plant are probably not even close to what they really are. Some people think they're made up or embellished a little bit, which is not true, because there wasn't too many guys that made it through the power plant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that served you well in terms of your navigating the business as compared to some of the lighter touch training that we hear about today at the Performance Center, for example?
You know what? If nothing else, it got me a little respect with some of the guys that actually been down there and know what we went through. So a lot of the guys that were doing the TVs at the time, and then we started the Saturday night show. Every time we went to the Saturday night shows, nobody wanted to work us, because all the power plant guys were known as, you couldn't blow us up. We all had great bodies, because that's all we did was train every day, 5 days a week. So, we were in top condition, and I remember Billy Kidman and guys like him backstage, and they're like, dude, we don't want to work you guys. Like, you guys got to work yourselves, because you guys, we'll get blowed up. We can't hang with you guys, which is, they might've been kidding around when they were saying that. It's not that they didn't want to work us, but it was kind of a compliment too. So, we kind of took it as a compliment, because, let's face it, there were some big guys in WCW and guys that were in shape, and when they give you compliments like that, it means something. So as far as the learning the business aspect of, I'll be honest with you, man, WCW, we didn't really learn any of the business. We kind of learned as we went. I don't know if they actually thought we were ever going to make it on TV or not. They kind of just start throwing us on TV, they give me the Kwee gimmick, which they didn't have a clue what they were doing with it. Same with a lot of the other guys, other than the Natural Born Thrillers. That was about the only, group of guys from the power plant that actually had some kind of direction in their what they were doing with them every week on TV. Because if you watch, say there was 12 segments of Nitro, if you watch it, you remember back then, the Natural Born Thrillers were on probably 9 or 10 segments. So, they kind of had an idea what they wanted to do. And, I had a little bit of direction, but not, and like I said, as far as the business wise, we just learned as we went, man. We learned how to, navigate our way through the airports, and I'm, getting rent-a-cars and going from town to town and this and that. No one ever really taught us any of that.
Yeah. A lot of people say, and they look back at WCW and they make kind of comparisons now to AEW. What was it kind of like working in WCW? Was it always an organized environment, or was it a bit all over the place, like some people say?
Yeah, it was not a bit. It was quite a bit unorganized. The locker room was great. Everybody, we had good camaraderie. I don't know what people talk about how the locker room used to be back then, but Kevin Nash always took a shining to all of us young kids and helped us out. Brian Adams, Brian Clark, Chronic, guys like that, man, that were, veterans in the business, been all over the world, wrestled for WWF, back in the day. So, they always helped us out. Eddie Guerrero always helped me out. We didn't get our rooms paid for back then. So a lot of times Eddie Guerrero, Brian Clark and Brian Adams and a lot of these guys, top guys, treat us good, and they would give us their rooms, because, they would travel, they'd go to the next town, they'd let us have their rooms for the night. So, all that stuff helped us out, and, kind of taught us, that they were passing down respect to us, and that's how, we needed to treat people coming up after us.
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of Hulk Hogan there at the opening of the show, and I've read some articles before where you're very complimentary of Hulk Hogan, and it's kind of a case where a lot of people say never meet your heroes, you'd be disappointed, but that was the opposite for you with Hulk, wasn't it?
Yeah. The first time I met him, there was the first loop we were on, a house show loop. I was wrestling Kid Romeo, which became the cruiserweight tag team champ with Felix Skipper on the last pay-per-view, if nobody remembers his name. Yeah, man, when I met Hulk Hogan, we were on that first loop, and I met him in Columbus, Georgia at a house show. It was a Sunday evening. And I seen him in the hallway, and I was like, man, I got to show him respect. I got to go introduce myself to him. And he was with Nick, and Nick was a pretty young kid at this point, because this was in like 98, 99. I walked up to him, introduced myself. He shook his hand. He introduced himself to me, and we talked for about 5-10 minutes. I remember Nick had a ball, and I played catch with Nick, a few times with the ball. And it was kind of a cool, first meeting of the guy that kind of basically got you into business because you looked up to him so much. So it was cool. He always said hi to me whenever he passed by or when I saw him. So never had any bad dealings with Hogan.
You mentioned Felix Skipper, just a phenomenal athlete. You had some incredible matches with him over the cruiserweight title that I recall distinctly. Just wanted to know how that came together. You seem to have some significant chemistry there and very memorable matches, to say the least.
Well, me and Elix were probably, if you come to the power plant, you were going to deal with me and Elix. We were kind of the two guys that had the gas tanks, the drive to, get people motivated, which I love doing, man. So, me and Elix were kind of in charge of that, unofficially through Sarge and Paul Orndorff at the power plant. And me and him worked together a lot down at the power plant. We worked a lot on indie shows leading up that WCW sent us to up in the Nashville loop with Burt Prentice, where all of us worked and stuff, usually on the weekends leading up to us getting on TV. So, me and Elix had 100 matches together. So, I was so comfortable wrestling Elix that I probably could have put a blindfold on and had a good match with Elix. So, and then when we were in Canada, actually, they put us at a semi-main event, the co-main event one night, because they like what we were doing and stuff. So that was a big compliment to come out of the power plant and be included in the co-main event of a Monday Night Raw. So that was one of my big moments in wrestling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any interesting Scott Steiner stories, Alan?
You know what? I actually love Scotty to death, man. Even though he's from Michigan, I'll let him pass on that one. But Scotty, I think, is misunderstood in a lot of ways. He likes to keep to himself. He's a pretty quiet guy. I don't know why, but the old thing, people want to see how tough they are. And Scotty, who better to do with Scotty Steiner? Because if you beat up Scotty Steiner, you probably were going to be considered to be a tough guy. So that's the only thing I could think of. People messing with this guy, like, I don't know why you'd want to mess with Scotty Steiner. But Scotty was always a great guy to me when I was over in Australia with him with the WWA. We hung out a little bit, and he took a liking to me. I always had respect for Scotty Steiner, and honestly, I've never been involved other than when he had that deal with Diamond Dallas Page backstage where they went at it. I've never seen anything negative backstage or otherwise with Scott Steiner, man. Nothing but good things to say about Scotty.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed when he got his WWE run as well. I'm not probably one of the only ones that enjoyed it, but I really did enjoy it, and I was happy for him as well.
Oh, yeah, me too, man. Like I said, I always got along with Scotty and Rick. Rick kind of rode me a little bit in WCW, kind of tested me a little bit, but I think that had something to do with Paul Orndorff, because him and Paul Orndorff are good buddies, and I think maybe Paul set something up with him one night in the locker room to try to see what I was going to do. But the Steiner brothers, like I said, even though they're from Michigan, I'm not going to hold that against them. But pretty good guys.
Excellent. Wanted to ask you about the origin. When you came in, you used your name and some other names, but how did the Kwee character come about? How was that pitched to you? And also that really cool pairing with Paisley Charmel.
Yeah, that was great. I love working with Charmel. So, like I said, we're doing the Saturday night show, and they were trying to find things for us to do because they liked how we worked. They knew we worked. We did whatever they asked us to do. All Chuck Palumbo, Rick Cornell, Reno, Johnny the Bull, Mike Sanders, all of us down there at the power plant all worked hard, man. We busted our asses, and they saw that. So we stood out when we were at the TVs, and but in a good way. We weren't walking around cocky backstage. Trust me. We had a lot of respect for the guys in the back, and and I think everybody would attest to that if you asked them. But I'm sorry, what was the question again?
just how the conceptualization of the Kwee character, how it was pitched to you, and your thoughts.
Yeah, so me and Mike Sanders were doing a gimmick on the Saturday night show, and like the Worldwides, we were doing the Double A team. It was short lived, but it was fun. I was Angry Allen, he was above average, so we were the Double A team. The first night we did this, we didn't really have the okay to do what we were going to do. We just thought, you know what, let's take a chance, Mike. Me and Mike were talking backstage. We're like, let's take a chance. Let's call ourselves the Double A team because Arn Anderson was the agent. So we didn't know if we were going to get heat from Arn for doing this or not. But after we did the interview, and believe it or not, at this time, Mike was scared to death to talk on the mic. Until he got into Natural Born Thrillers, he didn't want to get on the mic. So I was on the mic, saying, this is average Mike Sanders. I'm above average, and I'm, Angry Allen. And I said, we're the Double A team. And then I said it took two of us to do what four of you guys could do, and we didn't even need a horse. So it was a pretty good gimmick, and the crowd response was pretty good whenever we did it. And I loved doing it, and I wish they would have done something with it because in my eyes, it was a lot better than the Kwee character. Not that I'm knocking the Kwee character because it got me on TV and, got me doing podcasts like this. So, I'm grateful for that. But I had a lot of fun doing that, the Double A team with Mike Sanders. And so me and Mike were actually walking through an airport. Terry Taylor, Vince Russo is sitting at the gate. So we come up to the gate, and of course we walk up to them and, shake their hands, say hey to them. So then Vince kind of looks at me, and I had my hair spiked up, which is on the picture back here. It was kind of like that. And they were dumbfounded that I actually wore my hair like that out in public. So, which I guess it was a good thing because it got me noticed, right? So Vince said, hey man, I think I got an idea for you. So he in the airport, he told me to go to the after the loop we were having, he told me to go to the mall and go to the VHS store, the video store, and get a tape of Saturday Night Live of the Mango character. I don't know if you guys remember that character. It was Chris Kattan, the little skinny guy.
Yeah.
He did a character called the Mango. So Vince told me to watch his video and then get some of his mannerisms and just watch the video and study it a couple times. And then when at the next Nitro, he was going to have to talk with me about it. So I went home, got a video, watched it, watched this character and this and that. And so I went to Nitro, had a chat with him, and he asked me what I thought about it. And I said, is it, you want me to act like this guy? And he's like, yeah, something like that. His idea was he wanted me to be a wardrobe guy. And mysteriously, men or women had, not that the men were going to fall in love with me, but there was an aura about me where if you walked in a room, I kind of mesmerized you. So I kind of, put a spell on you with my handsome looks, And so that's how Paisley started falling in love with me because she came in the wardrobe to get her stuff fixed. And, then she was all like mesmerized by the Kwee. And so that's kind of how that started, which, it was a fun character and she made it better. She was great to have because she was great on the mic. And, Medusa was training them girls how to work at the power plant. So, we incorporated her in some of the matches and stuff. And, overall, she was great to work with.
Vince Russo, as you mentioned, he's often a controversial figure among the business, normally from people who have never been in the business. But what was your impression of Vince and his kind of creative mind for the business?
Well, like I always say, everybody's armchair quarterback. They could have done this better. I could have done that better. You know what I mean? But Vince was a good dude, man. He always treated the young guys, the power plant guys, great. Nothing but good things to say about Vince. And he's another guy I think he's misunderstood. When you're in this wrestling business, man, you got to be outrageous over the top. You got to come up with stuff that people wouldn't normally think about, and that's just the wrestling business. So, people don't like Vince Russo for it a lot of times, which is kind of puzzling to me because, as far as the wrestling business goes, I think Vince was come across as one of the normal guys. I mean, he's a smart guy. It's not like he's dumb. He just gets a bad rap, and for whatever reason, and I'm sure I get a bad rap from some people too. But you got to take the good with the bad in this business, and I think Vince does pretty well at taking the good with the bad with this business. But he, like I said, he helped me start out, get my chance with the Kwee character, and I can't fault him for trying something like that. And whether some people like it or hate it, it's just I'm stuck with it for life. So I got to make the best of it.
Yeah, I met the guy. He was over here for like a meet and greet kind of. He'd done a talk for an hour and a half just about his career and stuff like that.
What's up, Bobby?
And then it was actually only a couple of weeks back then, Eric Bischoff was over here doing the same kind of thing where he'd meet the fans, he'd tell some stories. So any impressions of Eric?
Oh, I love Eric to death, man. He always helped me out. Always super nice guy. I was so upset when he didn't get the company because when he came in the WCW the last few months of the existence of WCW, and everybody, was pretty excited about it because he was coming in there and he was changing a lot of stuff. He was giving me a pretty good push at the time. He actually, I had a few meetings with Eric. He'd always call me. He called me. We were in Indiana, and Janie Engel, which is the WCW lawyer, came to the locker room and got me. And I kind of got a little nervous, man. She come in there and wanted to see me, and she goes, "Mr. Bischoff, I'd like to see in his office." So I'm like, oh, back then when you're young, starting out in the business. You don't know whether you're getting fired or you don't know what's going to happen. So I was a little nervous, to be honest with you. So I went and sat down in his office at the arena, and we had a good talk. He promised me that he was going to give me a push, and he liked the way I worked. He liked, the way I kept my body in shape. And he told me all this, and he asked me to do him a favor that night, and he asked me to do a job for Rick Steiner. He wanted me to put him over real big because at the time Rick was kind of not taken serious, I guess. From what I understand, they wanted to build Rick Steiner back up. So I had no problem doing that for Rick because, Rick's a good guy. He always treated me good. And so I put him over real strong that night. And Eric came back afterwards and he loved it, man. He said it was exactly what I wanted. He said, I knew I could count on you. And then he started, we started building a relationship, and he promised me he was going to give me a push, and I was going to be one of his top guys. And had he not got the rug pulled out from under him, I believe he would have kept up with his promise. So I don't have nothing bad to say about Eric Bischoff. He always tried to help me out.
When I interviewed you on one of my other podcasts, the Shooting from the Hip podcast with King Angel Medina, we talked a little bit about the fact that there was a conception in the locker room that Bischoff had the consortium together, was going to take the company forward. Was it your impression that that was going to happen? And I believe the information was that WCW would move to Las Vegas for TVs and that sort of thing. Was that your understanding as well?
My understanding was, and I think everybody would attest to this, that we thought he'd already bought the company. We thought it was just in transition, changing everything over with his lawyers. Were finalizing all the paperwork. Like I said, the last couple of months, he was in charge of everything. So, I was pretty excited about it, like I said, because, I used to keep in contact with Eric, and he always, told me he was happy with what I was doing and he was going to give me a push. So as far as I knew, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but just from the guys that I talked to, back then about it, we were under the impression that he'd already, took over. They were just finalizing the paperwork.
Yeah, what if indeed? Being a Canadian and a fan of this man, I wanted to get your memories of wrestling Lance Storm on Nitro with that huge anti-American, well, more pro-Canadian gimmick. One of the very huge highlights of WCW towards the end.
Yeah, man, Lance was great, man. I love Lance. He was always a good guy in the back. Whenever you seen him on the road anywhere, he'd always, you could ask him anything. He'd try to help you out, man. He's a top-notch guy. And when I got an opportunity to wrestle him, I was pretty excited about that. That was actually in Chicago. I got to work him. And that was the night that Goldberg tried to ban my glitter because he got glitter on him because I had so much glitter on me. But yeah, I actually watched that match not too long ago, and it was actually a pretty good little deal for them never having anything concrete. Like, I didn't know I was going to work him until right before we went out there. So, no. and that's kind of stuff that you got with WCW. Like when I wrestled Goldberg, I didn't know I was working him until I got to the arena. And then Chuck Palumbo told me, hey, you're wrestling Goldberg. And that was kind of the same thing with Lance. They're like, hey, your name's on the board. You're wrestling Lance Storm. And I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. I was looking forward to that. And, Lance could make a broom handle look good in the ring. So, we had a pretty good little deal, and I was excited to work him. And that was the only the only opportunity I had to work him. And I actually saw him not too long ago at the Impact TV taping down here in Atlanta. I went to the show, and he's an agent backstage. So I got to, talk to him a little bit. So it was good seeing him, but yeah, he was great, man. Love Lance Storm.
I need to ask, because you guys have probably discussed it on a previous podcast, but the Goldberg glitter story sounds interesting.
Okay, so I don't know what it was about that night. When I came out, if you pull this match up, it literally looks like I'm wearing a crown, but it's glitter. And I got glitter all over. Like it's sparkling. I was glowing like the sun coming out there with all the lights. And right after that spot, Goldberg had a spot where he come out. I think he had a black beanie on and a black sweatshirt, and he got glitter all over him. It was everywhere. You couldn't avoid it. And he come backstage, and he was having a fit. Now, I was friends with Bill because of the power plant. He'd be in the power plant here and there. And, he did a lot of commercial stuff down there, and we were always in there doing stuff with him. So he was a good guy to hang out with or whatever. But business-wise, he was a little different. He was all business when it comes to business, which is fine. But it kind of pissed me off a little bit because that's my gimmick, they give me this gimmick, and they told me if I got any gay chance or, people call me a fag or anything like that, I was getting taken off TV. So that's a lot of pressure on a young guy trying to make it in the business where you finally get on TV, and then you get a character where they're kind of setting you up for failure. So I had to do my best to do whatever I could to try to make this character work. And that was one of the things I did. And, to me, it was kind of like him messing with my gimmick, I don't mess with your gimmick. Don't mess with my gimmick. This is how I'm trying to stay on TV and make a living. So it kind of hit me the wrong way. And of course I never stopped using the glitter. So I wasn't going to stop using the glitter just because Goldberg got mad about it. Did
he complain to you personally, or was it somebody else?
Yeah, he complained backstage to me, and he was saying it was it was BS, and he didn't like getting glitter on him or whatever. But tough, man. That's my gimmick. I'm not gonna stop doing my gimmick just because Goldberg. What if I'd have went to Goldberg and said you gotta quit using that damn that pyro when you come out because it gets all over the place, and then you get it in your eyes and everything. I'm sure he would have loved that if I'd have told him that. But he is Bill Goldberg, and I'm just Alan Funk. But just why would you want to mess with somebody's gimmick like that?
So WCW closed. You signed a deal with the WWF to come in and be part of that initial crew. Were you slated to be part of the, in my opinion, very poorly booked Invasion angle, or where did you fit in around that time frame?
Yeah, no, I wasn't included in any of that stuff, man, which was kind of frustrating, because nobody knew this was going to happen. Like I said, we thought Bischoff was taking over. I remember the last pay-per-view, the Greed pay-per-view in Jacksonville, which the next night was going to be the Nitro, which would have been the last Nitro ever. Nobody knew that. Like at the pay-per-view when we were there, no one talked about it. Now I knew about it because Kevin Nash told me about it, and he told me not to tell anybody. Whether anybody knew, I'm sure other people knew, but nobody talked about it. And guys that hung out with the power plant, I wanted to say something, but I promised Kevin I wouldn't say anything. And I'm usually a man of my word, and no one ever said anything about it that whole night. So then we get to the Nitro the next night, And the WWE trucks are there. We walk in, Pat Patterson, Shane McMahon, and we're like, oh shit, like, everybody in my shoes, like the young guys, were kind of scared. Nobody really knew what our future would hold in the WWE. And it was pretty short lived. We didn't really know at the time, but we kind of had a feeling that it wasn't going to be good for some of us guys in WCW.
Yeah. Did they give you any indication when they came in of any security? You guys are going to be fine with us, or was there any of that?
Yeah, of course there was. They're going to tell you what they want you to hear, because they don't. Whether they had any intentions or not, I don't believe they did. Just looking back on the events that happened, I think they were just telling us, picked up our contracts, because I tell this to everybody. So after we, Johnny Ace called me and said, "Hey, I got good news and bad news for you." He said, "What do you want first?" I said, "Well, give me the good news, Johnny. I'm about done with the bad news." So he said, "Well, the good news is WWE is going to pick your contract up." I said, "Awesome. So what's the bad news?" He says, "Well, you have 2 weeks to move to Cincinnati, Ohio, and work with Les Thatcher in the HWA. And you don't really have a choice. You got to move to Cincinnati in 2 weeks, or you won't have a contract." So of course that didn't sit too well with my wife and, some of the other guys' wives. So we, me and Mike Sanders, Elix Skipper, Kid Romeo, Lash LaRue, Jamie Noble, Rick Cornell, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple guys. Mike Sanders. We all got up, Shannon Moore. We all got up and we moved to Cincinnati. So me, and of course, they weren't paying for none of our travel. They weren't paying for us to move up there. They weren't paying for anything. Basically, Johnny A said, get up there in 2 weeks, and we don't care how you get up there. You just got to be less of school Monday morning. So, of course, all of us are from the power plant are going, man, we're going to go through the same crap we went through at the power plant. We got on TV finally. Now we're starting right back at square one, which was frustrating. Not that we were big superstars, but we just, we wanted a chance to go up WWE and prove ourselves. Because we thought we had already proved ourselves on TV as far as that went. So we thought we should have a chance on TV instead of going to train like at a power plant like scenario. But you know what? We tried to make the best of it, and we were all good friends. So, we had fun training together, this and that. And we had some good matches. We got to train with Val Venus, which was a great guy and taught us a lot of stuff down there. Of course, I worked with Eddie Guerrero down there a lot, and me and Eddie got along great, and he loved how I worked, and he always wanted to work with me. So that was a bonus. We always went to the gym together afterwards and trained with the weights, and then usually went out to eat every night and got to hang out with him. So that was definitely the highlight of the HWA stuff. And then we would go down to Louisville, Kentucky, and do a TV show, local TV show that we did with like John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista, all those guys that were coming up that WWE had plans for at the same time that WCW was coming in. So basically what our job was, this wasn't anything official. This is just from what I experienced. Our job was to go down there, make these guys from Memphis and the WWE, which Umaga, Steve Bradley, I know I'm going to miss a bunch of guys. All these guys come from Memphis for the HWA, and Lance Cade, which was with Trevor Murdoch, and then Mark Jindrak. All these guys were training down there. Rosie and Jamal, which was, the 3 second or 3 minute warning or whatever they were, Umaga. So basically what we did was help these guys get ready for TV, and then they fired all of us 2 weeks before Christmas. And that's exactly what happened. And, I like to think that's not really how they planned it, but just looking back on it, that seemed like how it went. And that's kind of how they wanted it to work. But, it's just business,
Brutal.
you just got to take the good with the bad. And, that's just the way it was.
Yeah. Were you expecting that?
I'm sorry?
Were you expecting that to happen near the time?
Well, you never want to. For me, I can't speak for anybody else, but like Elix Skipper and guys that I was close with, we always talked about it. Of course, in the back of your mind, you want to think they're going to keep you and you're going to do something, worthwhile on TV, and you're going to work with some of their top guys. What's up, Daz Reynolds? But unfortunately, that didn't happen. They came in and released us. We had some kind of idea that might happen because right before they fired us, like I said, 2 weeks before Christmas, when we went down to HWA to do the TV taping, they had a list up on the wall with all the flights for the guys to go home for Christmas. Excuse me, which was all like John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista, all those guys. And then all the WCW guys the names weren't on the list. So me being me, I'm going to ask. I already know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask anyway, because I want them to know that I'm aware of, the way we're getting treated. And I said, well, where are all our flights? I went to Danny Davis and Jim Cornette, and they were like, well, and Les Thatcher was in there like, well, you guys got to figure out how you're going to get home. If you want to drive or do whatever, we're not paying for your flights. And, so, you kind of feel like you're already getting pushed out the door. You know what I mean? So it wasn't a good feeling, but, you just got to roll with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So after that, TNA came about, and you were actually on the first ever TNA pay-per-view. Started a hell of a run. How did you get on the TNA roster? And secondly, what was the atmosphere like in that asylum one of those venues that we hear a lot about mythologically as fans?
Yeah. Okay. So I was pretty decent friends with Jeff Jarrett. Right before the TNA started, if I remember correct, we did some shows with WWA, and I think Jeff helped book them shows, if I'm not mistaken. And the WWA was Australia-based. Andrew McManus owned. We did a couple tours over there, and I got to wrestle PCO, which is a great dude, and different guys like that I never had an opportunity to work with. So the WWA was good. So at that point, I pretty much got booked on those shows because of Jeff Jarrett. After those WWA shows, they were starting a TNA, so I got a call from Jeff, and then he said he told me what the plans were for me and Lenny Lane. He wanted me and Lenny Lane to be a tag team, which was great because Lenny's awesome. He's a great worker. His body was always good. So me and him are a lot alike, and I'm still really good friends with Lenny to this day. I talk to him on the phone all the time. So we were promised going in TNA, we were going to be the tag team champs. They were going to build the tag team division around me and Lenny Lane, which was great, man. We were excited, a new company starting up, we're going to be part of this thing. And we were all in, man. We were excited about it. And of course, that's not the way it worked out because I don't know what it is about the wrestling business that I always want to promise you stuff. I'd rather not be promised anything and kind of work and earn the spot. Not that I didn't do that anyway, but we're promised all this stuff coming in the door. So the first night we wrestled, they had like they had a bunch of stuff going on. They in the beginning of the shows were actually pretty good, but the only problem is they didn't have TV. So you had to buy the pay-per-view, which I think was $10. We did it on a Wednesday night. So back then, not too many people were going to pay $10 every week to watch a wrestling show when they can watch WWE for free. So it was a great company at first, but it was a bad concept. They just didn't have TV. So, going in the first night, me and Lenny were fired up because, they're taking promo shots of me and him. We're going to be the tag team champs. And we were fired up, man. We were really excited about it. So the first night, America's Most Wanted, they wanted to establish them as a tag team. Chris Harris and James Storm, which two great guys, still friends with those guys to this day. They wanted us to do a job for them that night, and which Lenny and I had no problem with. So we did the job for America's Most Wanted. That was kind of like their, starting out match, and they wanted us to, make them look like a good young tag team coming up, which we did. And we had a pretty good match. And, from there, it started getting a little better. They had a tag team tournament, and me and Lenny beat Marcus Bagwell and Apollo from Puerto Rico. Then we wrestled a couple of different matches, and, we went over. We had some great matches. Then it come down to the championship match. We're in Nashville at the arena downtown Nashville. Excuse me. And so that night we're supposed to win the tag team belts. So then Jeff comes to me and says, hey, you guys are going to wrestle AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn, which aren't even a tag team. So we thought, well, they're not even a tag team. Not even sure how they got to the finals. Looking back on it, I'm really not sure. But so we had no problem with it. And then they come back later and tell us that they're going to go over. So we're thinking, this is the big tag team championship like we're promised, and we're not even going over on a tag team that's actually a tag team, which I don't have a problem doing the job. Don't get me wrong, but it's not at all what was on the agenda for us. So me and Lenny, we see the writing on the wall already. We're like, dude, this is not good. First of all, they wouldn't even fly Lenny from, he was living in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the time. They wouldn't even fly him to Nashville. They flew him to Atlanta, which is three and a half hours from Nashville. And he had to figure out how he was going to get from Atlanta to Nashville. So I live in Atlanta. So I pick him up at the airport and drove him up to Nashville every week. Because they said I didn't live far enough away to fly. So I had to drive. So having said that, you could probably figure out that they were going to stop using Lenny at this point because they didn't want to fly him in for whatever reason. It was too expensive to fly him into Nashville from Minnie or whatever. So they stopped using Lenny before they stopped using me. But and I was actually wrestling over in All Japan wrestling too at this time. So I'm wrestling at All Japan, TNA, and I'm doing pretty good in the wrestling business still. I'm still optimistic and fired up that things are going to start rolling for me. Then I get hurt over in Helsinki, Finland, and an accident almost killed me. Sonny Siaki smashed my face. So that kind of screwed my progress I was making. Any progress that I had made in TNA is now pretty much over with. They were afraid. They told me they were afraid to use me after I got my face hurt because I was a liability. Whether that was the case or not, whatever. I was still wrestling All Japan after I got hurt. So, and the strong style of Japan, if I can handle getting hit in Japan, I can handle wrestling in TNA. But, it just didn't work out that way. And I never wrestled for TNA after I got hurt.
What you mentioned your tag team with Lenny Lane. Where did they come up with the I guess controversial at the time Rainbow Express gimmick?
Well, Lenny was in with Lodi, and they kind of did kind of a gay gimmick, and I was kind of doing a gay gimmick with the Kwee. Not really, but it was a lot of people associated it with being gay. But so I guess they thought that was a great gimmick for us to do. I don't know why they chose that gimmick for us, because I always wanted to be, like Angry Allen. If he was Lenny Lane, I was Angry Allen. Like, I think we would have been a great tag team either way. But, the Rainbow Express had advantages. It was fun to do the gimmick. It was stupid. No one took it serious, which is, I always wanted to do a serious, Angry Allen gimmick because I always tell everybody, I equate myself to being like a wrestler, like a Chris Benoit, a cross between Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, kind of Chris Jericho type wrestler. And I always thought I was a good wrestler, man. And I never got to do anything that I really wanted to do in the wrestling business, which was kind of frustrating. I think I could have been a good technical, top guy in the wrestling business had I got a chance to do that. I never got a chance to do that. And I don't think I'm sounding cocky saying that. I just know I was a hard worker, and I knew I could have good matches with anybody. And a lot of guys like working with me. So, I just thought I always deserved a better shot than what I got. No, I'm not crying. Don't get me wrong. I'm not crying about it. Just one of them things that never worked out.
In terms of the business today, Alan, do you keep in touch with it at all, or what do you like to watch?
Very seldom. I actually watched AEW last Friday night. I think they had a 3-hour show on. I like some of the stuff that's on TV, and I dislike some of the stuff. I told you I became friends with Rene Dupree, and I do his podcast quite a bit with him when he does watch-alongs, because otherwise I don't really watch the shows much. And I remember we were watching Raw, and every time we watch Raw, dude, it was brutal. 2 hours go by, there's not even a match on the card. And I was taught the marquee says wrestling. So basically, you do all the other stuff minimal, and you wrestle more than you're going to do all the gaga goo-goo stuff. And when you watch Raw now, dude, there's hardly any matches on it. So SmackDown was a little better. AEW was kind of refreshing when it came in, but now they're kind of getting stale, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion. Not saying anything negative about it. It's just, to me, like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of like, and there are some guys that work for WCW working in AEW, and it just seems like they're kind of going to got all these guys on contract, and you only see a handful of them. So
Big contracts.
Sooner or later, bro, like, where are these guys making all this money sitting at home? When are they going to contribute to anything, or when are they going to realize that they're just wasting money? And that's kind of how WCW used to be too, because and I'll give you an example. JJ Dillon came in the power plant one day when I was in Paul Orndorff's office, and he had a list of guys, and he's like, who are all these guys? Can anybody identify these guys? Because, in the wrestling business, it might sound funny, being a business where, you're giving all these guys money, but it's funny because in the wrestling business, a lot of guys don't know people's real names. So I remember the Vianos from the power plant, they would always come down and train with us at the power plant. So he's like, who are these guys? What are these guys' names? And I even forget their names now, maybe Oscar or something. I said, those are the Vianos. And they're like, why are we paying these guys? They haven't wrestled for us for a year. But these guys loved it because they were getting a check in Mexico sitting there doing nothing. They're getting a check every week. And that's kind of what the AEW reminds me of now, just from guys that I talk to that say some of these guys are getting these contracts and they don't do anything. So it's kind of funny that these guys, and they're making big money from what I hear. Yeah. And you're sitting at home doing nothing. Kind of reminds me of Lanny Poffo in WCW, getting paid $500,000 a year and never working one show.
Or the Iron Sheik when the contract turned over and nobody realized it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, the Iron Sheik worked his gimmick a little bit, I'm sure.
You mentioned WWA, and I happened to catch a couple of those pay-per-views at the time. Thought the promotion had legs, but obviously in Australia the expenses is something else. You had an opportunity there to do the Funkster character. Was that your own sort of brainchild, or did they give you the idea and give you the freedom to run with it?
No. See, I like I said, I always grew up liking Hulk Hogan, and to be honest with you, I could emulate him pretty well. So the reason that came about was at the HWA. It was something that I was just doing because they weren't doing anything with me, and I was just wanting to have fun. I was stuck there anyway, so I started doing this gimmick just because it was fun to do, and kind of like a tribute to Hulk Hogan. But from what Kevin Nash tells me, he wasn't too happy with the gimmick. But anyway, I did it, and I didn't do it to make fun of Hulk Hogan at all. That was not my intentions. It was basically to have something fun to do in a place that I was stuck at, that I wasn't happy being at, and I was still getting a paycheck. So I thought, I'm going to do this gimmick, and I'm going to have fun doing it, and it's going to make my time here seem worthwhile. And that's basically why I started doing that gimmick there. But ironically, it got me booked in All Japan, wrestling with Great Muta and Kawada and Kojima and, the top guys in Japan, which, was great for me. But it started out kind of like just something fun to do. It was kind of a joke because, I wasn't happy where I was at, and I was trying to do something fun. And, it turned into me becoming really good friends with Randy Savage, doing his music videos, and got me wrestling in All Japan with great talent. And, it actually worked out in the end for me.
Just out of curiosity, did Nash clarify why Hogan was not impressed with it? The reason I ask is a friend of the show who's been on Cheap Heat a number of times, Randy Hogan, of course, did a version of the Hulk Hogan thing. And
now, did that guy ever wrestle, or he just did
off? Just wondering.
Yeah. Now, there was a guy over in Japan that did the gimmick for this Hustle. It was a short-lived promotion in Japan. He was Japanese. He actually flew to the States and asked Hogan his permission to do it. So maybe that's why maybe I got heat with him because I didn't ask his permission. I don't know. In the wrestling business, it's not hard to get heat. So I remember I was at the Gold's Gym where we used to work out up in Kennesaw, Georgia, where me and Kevin used to live in Ackworth. And he come in there one day. He goes, dude, Hogan ain't happy with you, man. He does not like that gimmick you're doing at all. And he didn't say why. And I just said, well, sorry, man. Tell him I'm sorry, but it's making me a little bit of money right now. So I think I'm going to keep doing it.
What's your thoughts on some of the guys that you wrestled with back in the day, like say, and people that you're in the locker room, like the likes of Sting, Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio, still kind of at the top of their game wrestling? What does that come down to, do you reckon, for those guys to still be there?
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Guys that treated me good in this business, this business here, a lot of guys maybe show you support to your face, but they really don't want you to go anywhere. Me, I'm the opposite. When these guys treat me good and I see Chris Jericho doing the stuff he's doing and he keeps reinventing himself, I think it's phenomenal, man. Chris Jericho was one of the coolest guys in WWE to me when we went up there, and I'll never forget that. And I'm happy for him. And, I hope he makes a lot of money, which I know he's making pretty good money. But he was always a solid dude, man. Rey Mysterio, always a first-class dude backstage, always treated the young guys, with respect. I got to go over him in one of the matches, the cruiserweight match where I wrestled him, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Lazarus, Elix Skipper, Billy Kidman. I got to win that match to go on and fight Mike Sanders at the pay-per-view for the title, which I was supposed to win, but they kiboshed that. And that's another one of those promises that, I was promised the cruiserweight title. Fit Finley came over to me when we were in Germany, and when I did that match, and said, we're going to put the title on you at the pay-per-view and this and that, and this is you're going to go over in this match, and never happened. But Rey Mysterio was always a good guy. Sting, I hear he's changed a little bit. Never had a lot of interaction with Sting, other than the first time I met Sting, he was an ass to me. And but the second time that I got to speak with Sting, it was a little bit later in WCW. It was out in California at the hotel, and he actually was cordial to me and nice. But I've heard he's changed a lot, and a lot of people say he's a really nice guy now. Steiners were always good to me backstage. Booker T was always a good guy. Trying to think who all the top guys were back then. Jeff Jarrett was always a great dude. Chronic, Brian Clark, Brian Adams are always great guys to me. Always helped me out. Always, giving me some of their sky miles, so I could upgrade to first class. Torrie Wilson was always really cool. Billy Kidman was cool. Conan was cool back in WCW. Pretty much everybody in WCW. I know I can't remember everybody back there, but the locker room, like I said earlier, was pretty good in WCW, man. Hugh Morris was always a good guy coming up to the young guys. Actually, the first match I ever had, I wrestled Prince Iaukea on Nitro, and they put me over him. And I remember all the Misfits in Actions, which Jerry Toot the Wall, he's passed away since. But me, Hugh Morris, all the MIAs, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Lazarus, we all got in a circle and they said a prayer for me before I walked out there. So that was kind of cool, That was in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm from Ohio. So all my family was there that night, and having them say a prayer for me to walk out and get my first victory on Nitro was pretty damn cool, man. So that was a highlight of my career. And, I always built them out. He was one of the guys. My dad used to come to shows. He used to collect coins, so he gave all these guys a silver Lady Liberty dollar in a plastic coin case. And Hugh Morris is one of the guys that my dad gave that to. Whenever I speak to Hugh, he always brings that up. So that was kind of a cool moment for my career then in Cincinnati, Ohio at that time.
Jack.
Well, what are you up to lately, sir, in terms of are you still doing appearances, and where can the fans find you on social media to keep up with what you're up to?
Yeah, so I just went to New York actually last Sunday and did a signing for KNS WrestleFest. I don't know if you've heard of those guys. Yeah. They got a Facebook page you can check out, but he does everybody that's anybody's been up there doing signings. So I still do signings, and I mean I'll still work. I just don't have a lot of people wanting to book me on matches. I'm not really sure how well the indie scenes are doing today, but I know some of these guys are making pretty good money on the indie scene. So, if anybody wants to use me, they can look me up. I'm on Instagram, FUNKALLAN, at, Instagram, at Facebook, Alan Funk 5 on X, Twitter. Just hit me up. I'm not very good at checking my messages all the time, but I do check them. And, I could check them 4 days in a row and then I might not check them for a week, so, but you know, I'm still in pretty good shape. I'm 52 years old, but I'm in the gym 5-6 days a week, still training. So still 220 pounds and still in good shape. So if anybody wants to use, actually, me and Mark Jindrak were trying to hook up with Renee and his tag team partner and try to do some indies with them, but so far we hadn't been too successful at that.
Well, want to thank you, Alan, for your time coming on the Cheap Heat Productions Wrestling podcast. But I'm going to throw to Maurice for his final words.
All right.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Jack said there. Really appreciate your time, Alan. We might get you on again because there's a lot to discuss that we haven't discussed even.
Yeah. So, and actually, I actually started doing my podcast again. It's called Get Funk Podcast. Right now, I'm just piecing stuff together and putting it on the YouTube channel and trying to get some subscribers and stuff like that. So if anybody wants to check that out, it's the Get Funk Podcast. You can check it out on YouTube. And hopefully we're going to have some good guests on there. And I'm actually working on Goldberg on there. He owes me a favor for doing that spear for him. So he told me that night he owed me a favor, and I haven't got a favor back from him yet. So let's see if we can get him on my podcast.
Excellent. Yeah. You send
I
over
appreciate
your
you guys having me on here, though. I'm sorry, Maurice. I didn't mean to cut you off, buddy.
No, you're great. Will you send your podcast to me in the DMs? I'll pop it underneath this video so people can go directly to it. And just don't forget, don't mention the glitter to Bill when you're asking him for the favor.
Yeah. Well, he owes me a favor either way. So you know what? I might just have glitter on the show. But yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Well,
man.
Fans, that's it for another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Wrestling Podcast with the esteemed Mr. Alan Funk. Keep up with him on social media and we will definitely keep in touch and make sure that we have you back, time permitting, in your busy schedule. Thanks again, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Alan.
Yes, sir.